Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the channel. Hope you're doing well. I'm Excoundrel. I'm sure most of you know that I'm Excoundrel. And we're going to be doing a patch 3.1c notes breakdown today because this patch is going live tonight, I believe, EU time and afternoon NA time. First of all, thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. These guys have got about 2 shout-outs in about 50 months, so appreciate G2A for continuing to support the channel, and you can find a description link down below. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I need to take like 5 minutes break before I film this video because I ate way too much fish pie and I feel ever so slightly nauseous. So I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I think I'm good now. We'll see how it goes. Right, so Elemental Rift is returning and they've made some changes. I'm actually going to be doing some playing of Elemental Rift this time around. I didn't actually get the chance to play too much last time, but from the changes that they've made, I do think these are changes that are better for the wildrift as a product. Mostly because the way that the Elemental Rift felt previously was that it took too long to get any payout rewards, and by the time that the Soul and the Elder Dragon became relevant, games were often kind of decided anyway, and it was usually just the winning team would be able to take it. This time around, it's going to be pretty crazy. What's going to happen is that after the first dragon is taken, so at around 4 minutes into the game, I believe, there is going to be immediate terrain changes. So you're going to get a terrain change from the first dragon, which is pretty crazy. So you'll see the rift transform pretty early on into the game if that dragon gets taken. The next dragon will give you a soul. So you basically have to think about dragons before Baron and Elder Dragon and etc. So you either have if you miss the first dragon, you have to deny the second dragon. If you miss the second dragon, you have to try and deny the or whatever. You have to have hoped you've taken the first dragon. So basically, it's going to be pretty wild the first 10 minutes of the game because dragon souls in general are quite powerful. I think it depends on how powerful those souls are in particular, though. Obviously, being a pre-10 minute buff, potentially it might not be like a game ender like it is in the League PC version, but it does mean that there is something that you will have to think about contesting, and it also opens up, again, some really meaningful decisions, I think, around Rift Herald versus Dragon, and which one's better for you and your team, and which one's going to provide more for your team. But I definitely think with a soul being on the line from the second dragon, you probably need to be contesting at least one of those dragons and hoping that you're taking it, which is pretty crazy to think. The third dragon will be the Elder Dragon, I think. The team trains 2 dragons, blah, 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 blah. Where is it? I think it's that. So it's just 2 dragons, and then is it still gonna be 4 dragons for the Elder? But regardless, it's going to be a lot quicker pace, I think. We've got some new skins. We've got some new icons, not as many as previously. We have a new event, a Poro Bilgewater event. I do feel kind of bad. A dev called Juno is responsible for events, and they are leaving wildrift to go work on the R&D team in Riot. I do feel kind of bad that in all of my videos I say I don't really care about events because that's like their entire job. I know how much events mean to like the wildrift community, and actually reading the comments in some of the videos where I talked about kind of how I interact with events, I saw that a lot of players actually really like events. So I just want to say, Junior, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to diminish your contributions to wildrift and your job. I've never for any game ever, I've never really been that bothered about events, but I have read significant numbers of comments on my videos, all of which saying actually events are really important to me. So really, big thanks for all the event work that you've done on wildrift over the last like year and a half or however long, maybe even further than that, 3 years or so that you said you've been working. So hope you have all the success in your new role, and I know that a lot of my audience do actually really appreciate the events. Champion changes. So we're kind of straight into champion changes on this patch. Blitzcrank. Okay, I read this earlier. Basically, they wanted to reduce Blitzcrank's armor to make up for his engage potential with the new overdrive mechanic. Despite them actually saying they were going to, they never actually implemented the change. And when they reviewed his kind of win rates and his performance, they were like, okay, fine. He actually looks okay without those armor changes. So basically, this isn't the change. what they're telling you is that they've reverted the old change that never went through, but they're basically stating what his armor and his armor per level now is. But you get 122 armor naturally on Blitzcrank at level 15, which is, by the way, I think one of the highest in the game. So Blitzcrank's like naturally a ridiculously tanky unit, even without buying armor at all. Darius has been overly dominant, and basically he's stacking too quickly in the late game. His natural attack speed gain is going to be cut by over, well, just about 12%, which might not seem like a lot, but when it is like base attack speed, that's actually a pretty significant deal. And that's also going to affect like, you know, how he feels with attack speed items, especially if you're buying something like Trinity Force on Darius. But essentially, if you don't buy any attack speed items, and a lot of Dariuses don't buy attack speed items or as frequently anymore, it will take you just a little bit longer to stack 5 stacks in a team fight. Obviously, I don't think it will take you that long, because one of the great things about Darius is you have basic attack, second ability, basic attack, reset, basic attack. So you're going to get 3 stacks for free from that anyway. And then it's just about either hitting a decimate or just stacking again. So it's, even if you nerf the attack speed, it's never going to really take that long as you're playing Darius properly to get 5 stacks, because you have such a really powerful basic attack reset tool as part of your kit, which naturally gets you 3 stacks pretty quickly anyway. But regardless, I know it's a big attack speed nerf, but attack speed's never been that important to Darius. And I think that in general, you're going to still feel Darius being strong in the meta. Hasn't got, you know, he's a pretty strong blind Baron lane pick, will still remain useful in team fights, I feel, so I think he's going to be fine. Here we go. These changes right here, I feel like I've been asking them for them for over a year, and I'm not going to take credit for the changes, but I feel like I'm going to take credit for the changes because I've really wanted this particular change on Fiora, and I think I've mentioned it every time Fiora's popped up in the patch notes. I've really wanted this change. TLDR, they are reducing the lunge range. Finally, her first ability range is getting nerfed, both the dash range and also the range at which it searches for a vital. So basically the dash range is how far she jumps, and the search range is how close you need to be for a vital or for a target for her to hit. So basically they are reducing the dash range by a small amount, 0.5, which, if you think about her dash range radius right now, it is just over, let's think what 0.5 is times 8. It's about like 16 or so percent. Not 16%, it's ridiculous, isn't it? It is 0.5 times 8. So it's like 13%. They're like reducing it by about like 13%. And they're reducing the search range by, let me do this again, about 16%. So they are reducing her lunge range. That radius is going to come in by like about 13%, and her search range is going to come in by about 16%. So essentially, not going to dash as far, not going to be able to basic attack from as long a distance, which I think is the correct way to nerf Fiora. The difficult way, I'm sorry if my mental maths was total garbage there, by the way. It's quite late. It's like nearly 10 p.m. and by this time I'm usually asleep. The most annoying thing about Fiora is building a grass stack and having an untradeable lunge that you can't deal with. This time she has to be closer to you to activate it, which makes her much more vulnerable when jumping into a good melee trader. However, to compensate, they are increasing the vital base damage when it's procced, and they are also giving her a slightly increased AD ratio per 100 bonus 100% bonus AD. So essentially, I think she's actually going to scale better damage-wise, and she's going to do more damage on her ultimate too. However, her trading in lane is going to become riskier, and I think that is part of what needed to be riskier, because we all know that Fiora is an insane late game champion. What she shouldn't be insane at is level 1 dominance in the lane, and so I think this is some good changes. And I actually do think the problem is it's very difficult to know just from theory how much this dash range is going to change her interactions, but it is the right move to make her more vulnerable in the laning phase, and as such she could be affected in terms of her dominance in the Baron lane. I'm very excited to see how this plays out. I still think she's going to be good jungle, though, by the way. I still think her jungle will be relatively solid. Basically, Jhin was outsmiting junglers. I love that they said, unfortunately for other junglers, like Jhin is a jungler, Jhin was just doing like uncapped damage with his force shot on monsters. So they're capping it to 1000, which is equivalent to a level 15 jungle smite. But I believe it's like physical damage, and monsters do have armor, so that will be reduced. So he shouldn't technically outsmite anyone on objectives now, which is a good thing. Small nerf for Jhin, but it's like I wouldn't say it's going to impact Jin's position in the meta. So for some reason, Kaisa needed buffs. I really did feel like Kaisa was the most consistent, like strongest late game or strongest AD carry in the high elo anyway. They're reducing the cooldown on her supercharge in the late game by 3 seconds, which is actually kind of nutty. That means you're going to be able to go invisible much more frequently. And I think this is only going to cement Kaisa as like an S+ tier AD carry right now. Lucian is having his piercing light cooldown reduced by 1 second. I already felt, the more and more I saw of Lucian on the current patch, I already felt that he was pretty strong. This is definitely going to help Lucian's solo lane. It's going to almost certainly help his laning phase. Piercing light is like the staple ability. And I know they're talking about his caster AD carry thing, but you have to remember that when Lucian casts an ability, he does proc his light slinger passive. So this is going to allow him to, on the scope of a full team fight, potentially weave in another set of passives into an engagement. So it's going to affect his auto attacking a little bit, because he's going to have that light slinger passive a little bit more frequently, especially when this ability is level 4, level to level 4. It's only 1 second though in the grand scheme of things, so it's not going to suddenly catapult Lucian. I do think I underrated Lucian on my last tier lists, but he could definitely be like a solid S tier AD carry on the next patch. Despite, we talked about this. Despite nerfing his clear speed, he was still kind of broken. Master Yi, his Alpha Strike was still doing ridiculous damage. And I think a big hefty nerf to the scaling on it was warranted. And they've only changed the base damage by... Well, they've made his mid-game, like, his early game slightly better, his mid game slightly worse, and then his late game slightly... So, like, his early game slightly better, but then his, like, mid to late game slightly worse. And then they've reduced the scaling on it. So, this is good. We'll have to see, like, in practice, how much damage his Alpha Strike now does to that single target. You have to remember that he's still going to hit, a single target a number of times with that changed Alpha Strike, and I don't think that's a mechanic that they want to change. So that the correct decision, I think, was to tone down the damage. Like, a big AD ratio nerf this is a significant AD ratio nerf. So that, coupled with a little bit of base damage knockoff, might be enough to make it feel a little bit less oppressive. We'll have to see. I just think the very mechanic of being able to attack the same target multiple times is quite strong, especially if you're playing on hit. So, wondering whether this is going to genuinely make Master Yi worse or not. We'll have to see. Unarguably, it's going to make him worse, but is it enough to make him feel bad, especially with some of the item changes that you're going to see coming up? This is another kind of Blitzcrank type thing. Olaf's Reckless Swing should be 30, should basically deal HP damage that is 30% of the damage that is dealt. So basically, they're adjusting the health cost to reflect some of the base damage nerfs they gave in the previous patch. So yeah, basically, don't worry too much. This is not actually any changes to Olaf. They are just it's like a minuscule buff. They're basically making it so that he doesn't spend as much health when using his third ability, but the health spending changes are so minimal that it doesn't really make a difference. Rakan apparently needed a buff, so he's getting extra mana, and he's going to have slightly more mana in the late game. Cool, not a big deal. I think Rakan's still going to remain very highly sought after and competitive, and I still think he's going to remain a high tier AD carry. And Sett kind of getting a beefy nerf, especially on his regeneration in the laning phase. That's getting nerfed a pretty significant amount. It's only really becoming or going back to normal by the time that you get to late game. So his like the majority of his grit regeneration, which is the regeneration that he gets from taking damage, essentially, that's getting nerfed pretty much all the way through the game by a decent amount, which is a pretty significant deal for Sett. They're also nerfing his knuckle down base damage by 5 at every rank. The regeneration is the biggest thing because that was a really nice tool in the Baron lane to take trades and kind of regenerate out of them, especially because Sett traded really well with the knuckle down, especially as that's the ability you generally tend to max first. I still think Sett's going to be useful. You know, Sett's one of those champions that his kit is actually just really good. And regardless of kind of like some of these small changes here and there, you're still going to find that Sett remains a very, very viable pick, you know, regardless. So it will probably hurt Sett, absolutely. This especially is going to nerf his Baron lane because you generally tend to find Sett wins Baron lanes by just getting into kind of straight up trades, like, you know, playing to the thematic of his character. Sett kind of wins Baron lane by literally running at the opponent, pulling them in and hitting them with his fists. Well, his fists have taken a bit of a nerf, and he's not going to regenerate as quickly coming out of that fight either. So, you know, or as much coming out of that fight either. So that's a pretty significant change, realistically. And you'll have to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more, I guess, thoughtful about the types of Baron lane trades you're looking to take. And for some reason, Yumi needed a buff. Again, Yumi is one of those characters that at high elo, when people know what they're doing, she's going to feel really impactful. But at low elo, when you have to attach to... I need a drink before I talk about this bloody cat. At low elo, when you have to attach to people that don't really know what they're doing positioning-wise, she's always going to feel less impactful. That's just kind of the drawback and the sort of the ethos of her kit. But they're basically giving her... slightly more shield on pop and block. They're increasing the mana restoration that you pick up, which is basically you get an extra 3% max mana. But they're also reducing the cooldown on Prowling Projectile by a lot in the early game and a little bit in the late game. And they're also reducing the mana on it. Prowling Projectile still doesn't feel super impactful. So I kind of understand why they're doing this. These are some relatively minor changes overall. This is the biggest, the Prowling Projectile changes, but the passive changes aren't a massive deal. The Prowling Projectile changes, especially in the early game, though, are pretty significant. Like 3 seconds in the early game is a relatively sizey cooldown reduction. It's you know, 25% straight off the top of that initial cooldown. So it maybe makes her feel a little bit more viable in lane. We'll have to see. But she was already very, very high tier in competitive and pretty high tier in high elo. So this is going to make her probably... I mean, I didn't put her S+ tier, but... you're probably looking at Yumi being S+ tier on the next patch, for high elo especially. Banshees Veil is getting a slight AP buff and an ability haste buff. It's, you know, I think Banshees Veil, you have to be careful because it offers a really, really unique passive that you really only want in certain scenarios. Just realized, like, with my hair like this, you can kind of see what I look like with short hair, which is a while ago since I've had it, but there we go. Thing about Banshees Veil is you need to remember the thematic of the item is supposed to be very specific. It's like, it's an anti-magic damage, anti-important ability item. So you don't want to give it too much legs in the stat department because it's not something that you really want to be picked up as a core in every AP build path. But realistically, with Luden's Rabadon still being like the go-to 1-2, you know, Banshees Veil is probably not going to come in early in the build path regardless. But with these ability power changes and the ability haste increase as well, like, you could see this as a good viable third item for a lot of AP carries, especially some more of the mage type AD carries. So I think there's some good changes, and I think, you know, Banshees Veil was already pretty solid, and I think it will be now a very, very good item choice for a lot of mages, especially as like a third item. Could even do as a second item before Rabadons, depending on the situation as well. Yeah, TLDR, Hextech Mega Drive still not being bought a lot, and it needs to be cheaper. So they're making it about 150 gold cheaper. I think it's good. It is a mini Rod of Ages, you know, to an extent. And with Rod of Ages getting a nerf as well, like, I think Hextech Mega Drive, you know, does sit in a realm where it should feel good. I know from talking to some of my high-low support friends, they've tried it out and they just still can't get on with the item. They would rather be building items that they know they're going to get value out of every time. That's one of the problems with things like Mega Drive and Siege Jar. Like, these are items that you you should get value, and with, especially with Mega Drive, you know that there's going to be situations where you do get value. But again, unless you're consistently buying this item to be able to cycle your passive or cycle your active item in a team fight, it doesn't feel like it's worth it. Like, you know, if you've used your active item and you use this and it reduces the cooldown, and by the time that you're out of the fight, oh, it comes off like 10 seconds later, great. But you know, the use cases for that can be somewhat limited. Like maybe redemption, you use it at the start of the fight. This makes it that so following the fight, you're able to heal your team up to take an objective safely, or Baron safely. Like kind of, you know. But the problem is that true power fantasy for Hextech Mega Drive needs to be readily achievable, which is I cycle my active item in a single fight, because I'm spending 2,500 gold for what is basically a budget Rod of Ages, and that passive is supposed to be something that I can quite feasibly achieve. And from what I can tell from a lot of my friends that are playing support at a high level, and I haven't played, I've kind of switched to jungle recently, so I haven't played support much, especially with all the Mega Drive changes. They've said that that's just not happening as often as they'd like, and therefore it doesn't really feel like a very good investment for money. Like it's a risky investment. Basically, they'd rather spend 2,500 gold on something they know is going to genuinely give them something strong. Okay, so they're basically making Jeromes Fist build out of Longsword rather than Ruby Crystal, which I believe is going to impact Divine Sunderer players, because Jeromes Fist is a Divine Sunderer item. So this now means that you could, technically, as a Divine Sunderer jungler or Divine Sunderer Baron laner, build Longsword so you don't get kind of gimped in the early game, because I know one's Xin Zhao jungle, or Xin Shao. I can't say it. Someone keeps correcting me, and every time I make a Xin Zhao video, someone keeps correcting me. I just want to say it right for once. I usually started Longsword and went straight to Black Cleaver, but now there's a genuinely viable option where you could build Longsword and go into Divine Sunderer. Especially if you went like Longsword, back, Sheen, that's like a really good item spike, and then you get Divine Sunderer. That feels like a good build path now. Mortal Reminder is not getting much play because Serraldo's Grudge is kind of OP. So they're going to make it have slightly more attack damage. 5 attack damage realistically is not going to make you want to buy Mortal Reminder over Serraldo's Grudge, because remember, they have 2 very unique passives. You know, Mortal Reminder is almost only ever bought in situations where healing is a problem. Whereas Serraldo's Grudge is just such a good item for so many different carries. Anybody that casts an ability gets value out of Serraldo's Grudge. Whereas Mortal Reminder very much is, despite the 5 AD buff, kind of an anti-healing item, which feels only relevant in some games. Although with the prevalence of Sona right now, Mortal Reminder does feel like a good item in general. Trinity Force, they nerfed it, and now they're buffing. I think they nerfed it anyway. They are buffing the attack damage by 5, and they're increasing the health by 50, just to make it feel a little bit more of an option versus Divine Sunderer and Black Cleaver. It's nice, but it's still, Triforce will be a more specific pickup for carries that genuinely want things like the attack speed, etc. And her Yomu's, they're basically buffing it again. A while ago, they nerfed the armor penetration, and now they're buffing it and giving it more ability haste, which is nice. Zed, Lee Sin, those types of champions are going to benefit from this. The only other big thing that is worth talking about, and this is actually bigger than maybe meets the eye. For most of Wild Rift's lifetime, the jungle meta has revolved around the River Scuttler, or the Rift Scuttler, and the immense payout of securing one or both of these creatures makes it a must clear for camps for junglers early on. To reduce the overall value of securing these crabs, we're reducing the experience they grant, and this should allow junglers to focus on their own camps rather than just tunneling onto this neutral objective. They kind of hit the nail on the head of the jungle meta, and I know this because I'm playing jungle a crap ton right now. You generally either red side clear into Scuttle, or you go red, Razor Beaks, blue, Scuttle, just because that's how it happens. I will be completely honest with you. For aggressive junglers who don't mind taking early trades, you're probably going to still be in the camp of taking a River Scuttler, because it just fits with the pathing really well. You can go out, you can take it super quickly, it grants you some vision, and you can go back into your own jungle, even though you're losing a significant amount of experience on the River Scuttler now. And that will actually affect getting level 4. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to instantly get level 4 off the back of the River Scuttler take from a 3 camp start, for instance, which includes both buffs. But if you're an aggressive jungler, you probably still want to take these because it's an area where you can maybe look to take advantage of the other enemy jungler earlier into the game. Or if you have good vision control and you're exactly aware of where the enemy jungler is and you're just going to the opposite scuttle, is something that you might as well take anyway. However, for junglers that want to be a bit more risk averse, people like a Moo, for instance, maybe people like Wukong who don't have the best early presence, this means that you don't need to worry too much about the River Scuttler because you're not missing out on a massive amount by letting go of it. And you can just focus on your own camps, and it's much riskier for the enemy to invade and take you on at your own camps rather than, you know, in the neutral objective area around the river. So I think this is good, but realistically, just with the way the jungle meta is right now, and there are a lot of really good early aggressive junglers in the meta right now, you're still going to see River Scuttlers be a staple part of the jungle rotation because it's either a place for you to take or get advantage of the game very early on, or it's just something that fits naturally into your clear path. And especially if you know where the enemy jungler is and you're either trying to avoid them or meet them, this is still going to be a place that you look to meet in the early game. And the only real way that you're going to make Rift Scuttlers be less prevalent, I think, overall, in a significant way, is by basically delaying their spawn time. And making it so that you have a bit more time to clear your own camps before wandering into the jungle and worrying about Rift Scuttler. That's just my opinion. Right, that is everything on patch 3.6c. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you very soon.